In the last lesson, we managed to create a single array which contained 3 questions, and we were able to show it on screen and show each of the questions. Now, in this lesson, we're going to try and figure out how to be able to check to see if they got the answer correct. So whether if they chose the right answer to each question. And in the process, we'll also learn how to work with a 2-dimensional array in Swift. Now, in order to do this, we need to somehow associate an answer with each question, right? We need to be able to say that, well, maybe this one should be true and this one should be true, but this one should be false. So how can we associate 2 pieces of data together, even though our quiz lives inside an array? Well, one way of doing this might be through the use of an array within an array, or what you might call a 2D array. So far, the arrays that we've been creating look something like this. We have as many items as we need, all separated by a comma and placed inside a single array. So this is our collection of items. Now, we can also create a 2D array where we have individual arrays. So there's 3 arrays in this case, each with 2 items, all packaged inside a larger array. So how would you retrieve a single entry out of a 2-dimensional array? When we had a 1-dimensional array, retrieving items was pretty straightforward. In order to retrieve items out of our array, we simply added a set of square brackets and a number after the name of the array. And that number, well in this case I, refers to the position of the item that we want. Now, if we had a 2D array on the other hand, in addition to adding a first set of square brackets where we're picking through the outer layer of arrays, now that we've picked out the item that is at this position, let's say this one, which is position 2, well now we have access to yet another array. And in order to pick from this inner array, we have to tag on another set of square brackets in order to pick between these 2 items in the inner array. So here's a question. If we had an array that was a 2D array that looks like this, so we have 1, 2, 3 inside its own array, 4, 5, 6 in its own array, 7, 8, 9, and then these 3 arrays are packaged into another array, well, how do you get hold of the number 9? Pause the video, have a think about that. What would your code look like? Well, in this case, the positions of the outer array are 0, 1, and 2, and then the positions inside the array are also at 0, 1, and 2. So in order to get hold of this number 9, we first have to tap into our array and then specify that we want the array that's at position 2, so it's this one, 7, 8, 9. And then within this array of 7, 8, 9, we then specify the position of the item we want, which is again at 0, 1, 2. So now we have array square brackets 2, square brackets 2, in order to get that number 9 out of this 2D array. Coming back to our code here, we currently have a 1D array, and we can turn it into a 2D array by simply making each of the items a array itself. So we now have a question and a answer, and I'm keeping it simple by making the array keep the same type of data. So they're both going to be strings, right? So let's go ahead and modify the rest of these. So we now have 3 arrays within an array. And if we take a look at the data type of our quiz constant, you can see it's now a 2D array of strings. So it's got 2 brackets around each side. And now if we wanted to pick out the first question out of our quiz array, then instead of simply specifying quiz question number, we also have to tag on a 0 at the end, because now it's going to pull out the first array using the question number, which starts out being equal to 0. And then within that array, we want to get the first item, so the one at position 0. So this would be our code overall. So now that we have the quiz in a 2D array, well, let's check the answer that we have in our 2D array against the answer that the user chose. So firstly, we have to figure out what answer they chose. So right here, I'm going to create a new constant called user answer, and I'm going to set it to equal the sender.current title. So whichever title they chose from the two buttons that are linked to my IB action, so true or false. Now this user answer is going to be equal to the string true or the string false. So we can now use it to check against the actual answer. Now the actual answer is going to be equal to the quiz array at position 1, right? So similar to how we got our quiz question, we're going to set this equal to the quiz array, and then the first layer is going to be question number. So it's going to be one of these arrays depending on which question we are on. And then the second one is going to be position 1 because that's where the answers live. They're all at position 1 inside the array. So now, in order to check to see if the user got the answer right, all we have to do is create an if statement and check to see if the user answer is equal to, so double equals, to the actual answer. Well, then in that case, that means they got it right, right? So we'll just print right. Otherwise, namely else, well, they probably got it wrong because their answer doesn't match the actual answer, so we'll write wrong. Now, if we run our app, we should be able to see that question checking mechanism in action. So if we run our app, you can see that if I press 4 plus 2 is equal to 6, yeah, that sounds right. So let's press true. We got it right. 5 minus 3 is greater than 1. And then finally, 3 plus 8 is less than 10. That's definitely false. So now we get our last answer, but then our app crashes because we again fall out of the range of our quiz array. We don't have a fourth question. So we've got a working quiz app now, although it's a pretty buggy one. And if your app crashes on a user's phone, they won't know what's happened. They won't know that the index is out of range. They'll just think that you've made a terrible app. So let's fix this and help you maintain your reputation as an app developer. So the first thing that we need is a safety check. So inside the answer button pressed, before we increase the question number, let's first check to see if we're actually at the end of the quiz. And I'd like to pose this as a challenge to you. Can you use an if statement and only increase the question number as long as we're not yet at the end of the quiz? I'll give you a few seconds to pause the video before I show you my solution. Okay, here's my sample solution. So in our case, we want to prevent the question number from being increased past number 2. You might think that you can simply write the following. If question number is less than 3, then increase question number by 1. Or you might have written it like this. If question number is less than quiz.count, so the length of our array, then increase question number by 1. But let's double check this by running our app again. Even though we think we might have fixed the problem, you'll notice something quite peculiar. So if I press on the third button, my app still crashes. What's going on? Well, the line that's being highlighted is right here. So this is obviously the line that's crashing my app. And the reason is because the index is out of range. So the only thing that has an index that changes is my question number. And we can see down here that the question number was again allowed to go to 3, even though we said don't increase the question number unless the question number is less than the quiz count. So what's happening here? Well, here's what's happening. When the question number is equal to 2, 2 is less than quiz.count, which is 3. Well, now, in this case, question number increases by 1. So question number is now 3. And then it goes into the update UI and it tries to update the UI by getting the item at position 3 out of our quiz, which is what crashes our app. So instead of simply checking if the quiz number is less than quiz.count, we actually have to increase this by 1. So now when it gets to question number 2, then it's going to add 1 to it, so we never go beyond 2. And now if we run our app again, you'll see that we've solved our bug and it no longer progresses beyond the last question. Here's another challenge for you. See if you can change the code to make the quiz restart from the beginning when it reaches the end. So you should end up with a never-ending quiz. And it'll look something like this. So here we've got our first question, our second question, third question, back to the first question. So pause the video and try and see if you can get this functionality working in your app. All right, so how do we achieve this? Well, the place where we reach the end of the quiz is, of course, when the question number +1 is actually equal to the quiz count. So how do we catch that scenario? Well, we can simply add an else statement. So if it's gone beyond the number of items we have in our quiz, well, then we're simply going to set the question number back down to 0. So the next time we update our UI, we fetch the first question out of our quiz again. And that means our quiz will loop on and on endlessly, well, at least until the user gets bored. At this point, we're showing new quiz questions, we're checking the user's answer, and our app is no longer crashing. So now is a good time to restructure and reorganize our code. Currently, one of the biggest eyesores in our code is this 2D array. It's hard to read, it's hard to understand, not just for you, for any programmer. So how can we make this better? Well, we could use a Swift structure to create a question structure that contains a title property, so the title of the question, and then a answer property, so the answer of each question. So if you know all about Swift structures and you can create a structure to capture our quiz array so that we get rid of our 2D array and instead have an array of quiz items, each with a title property and an answer property, then you can probably skip the next Swift deep dive. But if you've never heard of structures, then I recommend heading over to the next lesson where we're going to do a deep dive on that and more. So the choice is yours, and I'll see you on the next lesson you choose.